The problem with ECDO is that it doesn't have a physical model, right? So it does not describe the dynamics of rotational change of Earth. Neither does it have agreement with basic physics, so the angular momentum is not conserved. Plus, it relies on many additional hypotheses.
Greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert D. Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. So, a few days ago, one of my viewers contacted me and asked me, like, Eugene, what do you think about the ECDO theory? And I said, well, I don't actually know that much about it, but maybe I'll take a look and make a video about it sometime. And well, since I haven't had any other plans for any other videos, today actually, I did take a look and I did make a video, which incidentally you are watching right now. So let's go.
So today we shall consider the so-called ECDO theory, in quotation marks, as you can see, by Roger Cunningham, aka EthicalSkeptic, okay? I would propose to call it a hypothesis, and I actually think he does it as well, but regardless. So ECDO stands for exothermic core mantle decoupling, and there's a big recent video about it on Ben Davidson's channel. I'm gonna show it to you. There it is. So 5 hours, as you can see. Not a small video, might I say. So it was on May 2nd of this year, but for a 5-hour presentation, I must say there's surprisingly little info in it, okay? So for the most part, it's some vague philosophical points and LLM-assisted self-aggrandizement. Like, you may watch it and confirm it for yourself if you don't believe me. However, the main point is very simple, actually. So Cunningham claims that the Earth kind of oscillates between two states. One is like we have today, basically, and another is where its spin axis turns 104 degrees. So I actually took a screenshot from about 3615. You may, again, watch the video if you wish. So this is the state of the Earth we have today. He calls it the state 1, okay, with the north around Greenland, North Pole, I mean. And the state 2, in which we're gonna transition soon, according to him, according to his hypothesis, is where the North Pole is somewhere in Central Africa, okay? So basically, the North Pole, or rather the crust, if you wish, moves in this way, so that this point kind of transitions into this place, okay? And vice versa, this point, kind of somewhere in the Pacific, it transitions to here. So the crust kind of turns, if you wish, almost 90 degrees actually, 104, okay? So it's kind of easier to visualize, I guess, if it's strictly 90, even though it's not, according to him, but it's close enough, okay? So yeah, and then, so right now the Earth rotates like this is the equator, right? And then it would rotate like this. So this would be the new equator, right? Yeah, so what can we say about it? Well, first of all, I am really baffled by a complete lack of physical model that he has. Like, again, he only gives these pictures, like I've just shown you, and some like Blender or some other 3D animations, okay? Whereas I think what he should have done is actually, consider an actual, because we're dealing with a physical problem, so we may actually describe it in terms of physics. Who could have guessed, right? We could have described the dynamics of rotational motion, right? Set up all the parameters like inertia and blah, 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 the mass of the Earth, the angular momentum, like most of them are actually well known, okay? They're easily measurable. Then we can make an actual simulation in like Python or MATLAB or Mathematica or whatever system you prefer to use, or whatever programming language, I guess, to solve numerically the equations. It's actually not that hard to do, People in, I don't know, like with a bachelor's degree in physics certainly can do it. Like pretty much anyone can do it with a bachelor's degree in physics, or even like the third-year students in universities can also do it. But for some reason, it has never been done, or at least he never shows anything like this, like actual physical simulation, right? An actual physical model, simulated on a computer. Like I'm not even asking for a simulation per se, though it would help a lot actually. I'm actually asking for at least a physical model, some meat underneath those pictures, because for now these are just pictures, all right? So the question is, why hasn't it been done, right? So is it due to laziness? Is it due to lack of expertise, like again, as I've said, it's pretty easy for anyone with a physics education, or is it because of lack of connections, like he doesn't have the qualifications himself, and he doesn't even have anyone to do it for him, you know, like again, a 30-year-old student or someone with a bachelor's degree, you know, on a weekend for like a couple of $1,000s or something, or for free even if they're their friend, and yet he presents this to like hundreds of thousands of people. A physical process which doesn't have a physical model behind it, which is very, very strange, I have to say. And again, if you do this, if you present some physical process without a model, the plausibility of it tends to zero, right? And by the way, again, I specifically like put it here, like you don't have to use equations, like a few sentences would be enough. You can just say, okay, like we have, if you understand what you're talking about, obviously, right? Which I have a suspicion he doesn't. I mean, I'm kind of implying something bad here, but this is how it looks, all right? This is how it presents itself. So you can just say, well, the Earth's angular momentum is such and such, the Earth's mass is such and such, but then we have this process. You should describe the process, by the way, which does this and this and this, and then this and this and this happens, and so we arrive at this new situation, right? You can describe a physical model verbally, it's perfectly fine, but I don't see it. He never does this, okay? He just says, we have a state 1 and state 2, and then state 1 turns into state 2. For what reason? I don't know. Like, he doesn't say it. At least I haven't found it. I mean, if you did, welcome to the comments. And one of the specific problems of not having a physical model that you arrive at is the problems with conservation of angular momentum. He actually does mention, here's the timestamp of this video, but I'll link the video in the description, by the way, so you don't have to search for it. There's even an animation of Earth like tilting like he supposes it will. So he does mention that the angular momentum should be conserved, but then he still proceeds to show this end result of his model. I guess we need to do it like this so people wouldn't think it's a physical model. It's not a physical model, all right? It's just pictures. Unknowingly so, he basically shows that no, his model does not conserve angular momentum. Why? Okay, the question is, well, it's because the crust does change its spin axis, right? We just saw that. Like, first we were spinning around this point, and with respect to the crust, right? Like if I stand here on the North Pole, I see the northern star, and I see all the other stars go around me like this, right? But if I sit on the same point after this tilt, I don't even see the North Star, right? It's probably below the horizon, but that's beyond the point. The point is, all the stars are above me now, like this, right? Which is a clear sign that I've shifted somewhat in real 3D space. The question is, what causes this shift now, right? So the angular momentum was directed, let's say, like this. I actually think it is directed like this. And now it's directed like this. So it used to be the axis of angular momentum vector used to pierce me, so to speak, when I was standing here. And now I'm standing at the same point, but the angular momentum axis is far away from me, right? Why? Clearly, the angular momentum of the crust has changed, right? So it's not conserved, at least for the crust. And yet Cunningham says it does conserve, which is just a mistake, right? Like it's just some basic misunderstanding, I guess, of physics. Yeah. So yeah, here I clarify, like angular momentum is a vector. Actually, it's a pseudo vector if you want to be fancy. So if it changes direction, and spin axis does change in direction, at least for the crust, it is not conserved then, right? Because like such vector and such vector are different vectors, even if they have the same length, right? So yeah, this of course can happen under torque, right? We have a normal equations of dynamical motion, meaning rotation, where torque may cause the change in angular momentum. Yeah, sure. Then the conservation is not, how do you call it, falsified, because we don't have a closed system, we have a torque, right? Yeah, so if we try to calculate what kind of torque would we need to assume such a shift in 2 days, I actually don't remember if Cunningham says it's 2 days. It's Ben Davidson who says that it's 2 days. Maybe for Cunningham it's 2,000 years. I don't actually know. But nevertheless, if we calculate the torque that would be required for something like this, right, which is of the same order as the same vector, essentially, then it would be around 10 to the 25th newtons times meters, right? And it's just to tilt the Earth's crust in this way, in 2 days, I mean, okay? And in 2 years, for example, it's just an example calculation, 10 to the 23rd newtons times meters. And compare this to the tidal torque of the moon and the sun, which are of the order of 10 to the 16th, right? So in 2 days, we'll require how much? Like 1 billion times bigger torque than the sun and the moon put on the Earth. The question is, where is it coming from? Because Cunningham, again, he's probably unaware that in his model, the angular momentum of the crust is not conserved, which is a pity, but still, he kind of, bypasses this problem of the torque because he says it is conserved, the angular momentum, whereas it isn't. So he never talks about this, about the torque, because he thinks he does not need it, because he thinks the angular momentum of the crust is conserved in his model, which it isn't, okay? Yeah, so this is a clear problem, right? And it would have been avoided, mind you, if you make a physical model first, and then speak up to hundreds of thousands of people, okay? It also might be reconciled, this whole thing, at least in terms of angular momentum, if everything below the crust, so we are only looking at the crust here, right? But what if everything else below the crust kind of turns the opposite way, right? So in this way, the change in the angular momentum of the crust, like this vector, roughly speaking, would be compensated by the change in the angular momentum of everything below the crust. So it would be the opposite vector, roughly speaking, right? So what we need is basically, in this assumption, in this modification of his model, is that everything below the crust, this red ball, now it's spinning just like the crust, but then it would tilt like this in the other direction, right? I'm not sure how much it should tilt, but still, it should tilt away from this tilt, all right? So yeah, so we have this sort of tilt for the crust, and we have the opposite sort of tilt for the everything else, pretty much, right? Then you may claim that the total angular momentum is conserved, right? But first of all, it's not addressed for the reasons I've already outlined. And secondly, why would this even happen? Why would the core or mantle or whatever tilt one way and the crust tilt another way, just spontaneously? It just makes no sense, right? They're currently in resonance, if you wish. Like they're spinning in the same manner. Why would this become not the case? I don't know. Again, a physical model would really help here, but we have none. So conclusion from this physical section is that Cunningham's claim about angular momentum conservation in his model is false. In fact, there is no model at all, at least a physical one. There's only a claim with pics and animations, with no physical basis behind them. Okay? You disagree? Welcome to the comments. Let's flame each other somewhat. All right, so then he actually calls this back and forth from state 1 into state 2 and back, and this is a reprise, by the way, it's not an emoji. He calls it mediated Dzhanibekov oscillation, okay? So I have no clue what mediated means in this context. I guess sort of. I mean, mediated equals to sort of. I guess that's what he meant. We're not going to talk about the physics of Dzhanibekov's effect because it's kind of irrelevant here for the sake of this discussion. What is relevant for the sake of this discussion is that Dzhanibekov's effect is a flip of 180 degrees. 180. So if it was a Dzhanibekov's effect, we would have north here, and after the flip, we have north. I mean, it's not even like this crustal image is irrelevant in this case. It's like the north would flip like this. It would be here. So basically, the north and south would swap sides if it was a Dzhanibekov effect. But it isn't, clearly, right? We need 104 degrees. Like, his whole theory relies on this value. Hypothesis, I should have said. Yeah. So, and that's even if you assume that Dzhanibekov effect is possible on Earth, which I highly doubt, okay? Because it would require Earth spinning around an intermediate axis now, which is, again, very doubtful. Yeah, like, you just make a calculation. Like, we have such a big equatorial bulge. I don't know how you can make a claim that our current spin axis is an intermediate one. Okay, but maybe you can make this claim. Again, to make this claim, you need a physical model, unfortunately, right? And we don't. But that would be a whole other type of discussion than we're having right now. A much more interesting one, actually. So, and my comment here is, even if the Earth does the Dzhanibekov flip, we just swap the north and south, so very little would change, actually, right? So the former north actually would become somewhat hotter, maybe a couple of degrees, I don't know, I never did any simulations on this, and the former south would become slightly cooler, maybe again a couple of degrees, I have no idea, maybe 10 degrees, maybe 0.1. Because of Earth's orbital characteristics, right? We have perihelion in January, which is the southern summer, and aphelion in July, the northern summer, where the Earth, like in aphelion, it's like 152 millions of kilometers away from the sun, and in January, it's like 149, right? So in January, it's slightly closer to the sun, and in July, it's slightly farther away. So January is objectively should be hotter, right? All over the world, but because obviously our seasons are not caused by our closeness to the sun, but by the tilt of the axis, actually. But what I'm saying is, if you flip north and south, like the summer. Okay, so right now we are closest to the sun in northern winter, and if our north would become our south, it would be the summer and not the winter. Do you get the idea? So that's what would shift the temperatures, exchange them a little bit. And plus, the northern hemisphere, the current one, has much more land than the southern, so it heats up more rapidly and it cools down more rapidly, so that would also might cause some changes like this. But it's all irrelevant with respect to this theory, in quotation marks, because it has nothing similar to Dzhanibekov's effect. So he just calls it mediate. This is my assumption, okay? It's just because it's something similar, and Dzhanibekov's effect already has a name for it, so people might, they might like give him a bit of a benefit of the doubt. They might say, okay, Dzhanibekov's effect is crazy, but it's possible. So this is also crazy, so maybe this is also possible. But the problem is Dzhanibekov's effect, okay, the tennis racket thing, it has been known for, 150 years. It has been studied using physical models, actually, right? The actual theoretical mechanics and stuff since the 1850s or whatever, maybe even earlier. Yeah. So it's not a big miracle. Everybody knows about it in the mechanics realm, at the very least, right? Yeah. So my conclusion here is that it would be very, very helpful if Cunningham, by you I mean Cunningham, stopped using this name, Dzhanibekov's effect, as it is highly misleading at the very best. Like, we're dealing with something else here. It's clearly not Dzhanibekov's effect, not even close, okay? Dzhanibekov's effect doesn't require torque, by the way, right? We do require torque because our axis changes, right? Yeah, there you go. Then a slightly more controversial things. I understand that. That's why I put them farther away. Like, pretty much this is already enough to, quotation marks, refute the theory, quotation marks, right? So now we're moving into a much more hypothetical realms. So I understand this perfectly. Like, if you disagree with the following points, I'm okay with that. I understand they're not for everybody. But still, there is something to talk about. So on 4639, Cunningham actually mentions some phase transitions of iron in the core. Like, he actually spends quite a while talking about this, and I have no idea why. Like, what's their place? How does it all relate to Earth's flipping, right? First, that's the first question. Second question, like, how and why would such phase transitions happen? What would cause them? right? That's the first sub-question of the second question, if you wish. And the second sub-question of the second question is, why would these phase transitions reverse back then? I mean, we're saying we're in stage 1 or whatever, state 1, then in state 2, then in state 1 again. So these phase transitions apparently like flicker, they change back and forth. Like, why? What is happening? I have no idea, actually. And, you know, if you have an idea what he's talking about here and why, and which role does all of it play in this flip or whatever you call it that we're talking about here, I wouldn't even call it a flip. Again, Dzhanibekov's effect is a flip. Here we are just having a turn, I guess, of the spin axis, right? But what's the role of iron in the core? I have no clue. Sorry. Like, if you do, welcome to the comments. Explain to me, please, because I have no clue. Okay, and that's point number 1 is just me misunderstanding or not understanding, period, what is happening here. But in general, we may say that it's all hypothetical anyway. You know, all the models of Earth's interior are hypothetical. That's a big problem because we don't really know what's in the Earth's core. Like, I'm not even sure it's iron there. Okay, but it's me again. I've said this might be controversial. This is just me speaking. For myself, if you wish. Like, what's even in the core? Does the core even exist? You know, I have this video. This is not my channel. This is my channel. What lies at the Earth's center? I'm going to link it in the description as well, where I actually say that there is no observational evidence which would observationally refute the hollow Earth theory, for example, or hypothesis, if you prefer. So, yeah. So basically, the lowermost 3,500 kilometers, aka the core, might just be empty. There might just be no core at all. It might just be a vacuum or a very sparsely populated gas, you know? Like, just watch the video. There's plenty of discussion of this sort in it. I'm not going to repeat it here because, again, this is not the topic of this video. So, in this way or another, a conclusion is that we have no idea what is beneath, like about 12 kilometers of crust. That's as much as we drilled. And thus, all the theories that rely on specific hypotheses about Earth's interior are also hypothetical themselves, including this ECDO hypothesis, not theory. And then, even more controversial, I realize that, but kind of want to talk about this a little bit, because Cunningham spends about 3 hours, actually, could be 2, talking about like ancient cultures, myths, like alignment of ancient structures and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. Like, he really spends quite a bit of this presentation on this, right? For example, he says that orientation of many of these structures, the ancient, like pyramids, you know, blah, 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 confirms, like they all point into this, the new North Pole of Central Africa or whatever. But the problem here is that it's just cherry picking. And I want to reference you to Matt Parker's brilliant point about Woolworth stores in the UK. Okay, so apparently I actually don't know. I'm not British. I'm not from the UK in the first place. But there was, or maybe is, some chain of stores called Woolworths, and there was a lot of them. Maybe there's still a lot of them, but there was a lot of them, like hundreds, if not thousands, okay? And so if you cherry pick their positions, you can draw some really amazing geometrical structures, like really cool ones. I'm gonna just show it to you here. So this was somebody, again, mapped some ancient locations and blah, blah, blah. We'll actually return to this if I wouldn't forget in a minute. And here, Matt Parker made the diagram with Woolworth stores, as you can see. These are perfect geometric patterns, right? So are Woolworth stores also some kind of alien design? No, it's just that there's so many of them that you can cherry pick pretty much any figure in any direction you want, right? And this is what what is happening here as well. Okay, yeah. Oh yeah. So until I forget, so you see sight lines, the white ones. These are actually legit. These are called ley lines. And ley line theory is a legit theory. It's just not, it's not what you think it is. It's not some feng shui energy lines, the dragon lines, right? It's actually the sight lines. It's a navigational system of ancient society. So if you wish, watch this video about the logistical theory of civilization, where we talk about how rivers were the main transport routes before railroads. So for most of humanity's history, rivers were the main roads, okay? I mean, the sea was as well, wherever applicable. But the ley lines helped people navigate, okay, the river system. Basically the road system of antiquity. Yeah. Anyway, so this is cherry picking the orientation. And then he references myths and pyramids and blah, blah, blah. But I have to once again remind you of my concept of fake olds, aka fake history, basically. Like most of our current history, textbook history, is fake. This is my point. Again, I understand how non-trivial this sounds. I mean, I don't care, honestly. If you are interested in things like these, watch this video, Fake Olds, where I introduced this concept. Then I have a video about the history of the church, which may interest you as well. This one. Then I have a video about pyramids specifically, where I show how they were built not more than 400 years ago. Okay. So all these points for me that Cunningham makes about the super antiquity of all these structures, I just don't believe in it. I'm sorry. I think the modern dating is completely broken, right? So real ancient Egypt must have been around this time frame. I mean AD, right? The current calendar, basically. Okay. What is 1 AD, somebody asked me in this convention, is nothing, basically. Nothing happened in 1 AD. Okay, but again, that's a whole separate discussion. I'm not gonna repeat it, because I realize like how removed it is from our current topic. But then again, the guy spends most of his presentation arguably talking about this. But I'm just saying, you know, if you're a skeptic, why aren't you a skeptic about history? Actually, let's transition to this point exactly. So, not really. He calls himself ethical skeptic, I'll remind you. He's not very ethical, and he's not a very skeptic. Maybe he's ethical. I don't know him personally, obviously. But he definitely isn't a skeptic. Like, where's your skepticism about history? As I've said in one of my recent shorts, history is just dehydrated politics. So you take the politics of today and imagine what kind of bullshit would people tell about it in textbooks in 50 years later, right? It would be all of the bullshit that we have today just kind of condensed 100-fold, right? And as much as you don't believe politicians of today, how can you believe politicians of yesterday? But history is exactly that. It's just the writings of politicians of yesterday. So yeah, I'm sorry. Like, you have to be, this is what skepticism would look like, right? We cannot prove ancient Egypt was like 4,000 years ago. The closest sources we have come from like 1700s on ancient Egypt. And it already looks ancient by that point, right? We have to assume it's this time point, but then again, I'm kind of digressing again. Watch my video, Fake Olds, right? I talk about it quite a lot in it. Yeah, so why don't we have any skepticism about models of Earth's interior then, right? Why are we just blindly accepting this model that we have today? A good question. This is not a very new model, by the way. The models of Earth's interior, again, I talk about them in this video about Hollow Earth, but they're like 100 years old at best, okay? Actually, less than that. Again, plate tectonics only became popular in 1960s. It's like 60 years old, you know? These are all very new stuff. So is our knowledge about history, by the way. It's all very new. It's like 19th century at best. More like 20th in most cases. Or where's the skepticism of your own physical model? Because guess what? There is no physical model. Why aren't you skeptical about that? Like, why aren't you asking yourself, hey, I don't have a physical model. Maybe I should build one. Huh? Or maybe I should ask someone who is qualified to build one and see what they say. Huh? Good question. So it's basically confirmation bias and cherry picking, which is not skepticism. It's actually the reverse of that, right? So yeah, as a presenter, he's okay, actually, but he's unironically using LLMs, which is, again, it's just boosting the confirmation bias, because LLMs are just autocomplete, right? You ask them, am I right? They will tell you, yes, you are right, of course. right? Because that's what you put in the prompt, right? If you want, they will prove you wrong. Easy. Okay, then the cultural aspect. So that's another kind of running topic I have on my channel, right? So there are many people who claim that the world will end very soon. I mean, I guess there always were, but in some epochs, it seems like there are many, more than average, let's put it this way. So Ben Davidson, for example, says that the world will end in 2040s. Well, yes, but with a caveat, the American world would end in 2040s. I completely agree with this, but not the world. I'm sorry, right? So the American culture worldwide is agonizing, and many people feel that. And that's how you get this sentiment that the world might end soon. Whereas in fact, it's just the hegemony that is ending, the American one, I mean. So Cunningham's world, and by the same token, Davidson's, is rapidly dying. So hence, on some level, he feels unwell and wants to rationalize that. And hence he arrives at a theory like this, which is not even a theory. It doesn't even have a physical model behind it, but it's okay. We just need some picture to put the blame for our uneasiness on, right? Yeah. So, but the good news is that for many people, it's not like that at all, right? And by the way, it's not the first such occasion. Like, if you look at the foundation of catastrophism, what would it be? It would be Georges Cuvier, right? With his essay on the theory of the earth from 1813. And if you look into it, it's actually telling basically the same story. Giant floods, like blah, 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 everything collapsing. And notice the date, 1813. What was that time? It's a Napoleonic time, right? It's the same cultural situation where France, previously the world hegemon, from 1650 to 1815, roughly, is falling apart, right? So yeah, and that's why we've had apocalyptic thinking all over the world in this epoch. Then you may think about the British Empire that fell apart after World War II, and we have Velikovsky, another big dude, with his own catastrophism revival, right? Kind of the same thing, right? 1930s, apocalyptic thinking all over the world. So all the Cunninghams, Vogts, and Davidsons today do the same thing. Like, we have a current, same cultural situation currently. Like the USA, previous world hegemon is falling apart. So we have the apocalyptic thinking all over the world once again. Yeah, so there you go. By the way, this is not a theory, okay? It's just an observation. Like, it's not needed to make an argument. I'm just kind of trying to psychoanalyze what is happening here, right? Because this has been a very prevalent topic recently. Like, all kinds of people come up with all kinds of theories why everything will collapse tomorrow, right? And this is why. This is the explanation, period. Everything's fine, okay? Except for this. I mean, obviously the collapse of a hegemony is usually followed by a war, or preceded by a war, or happens during the war. So, things are gonna be tough in this respect, but generally the world will be fine. So yeah, all of this is not needed, strictly speaking. Not the cultural aspects, not this. I don't care if he's a prick or an asshole. I'm not sure if he is. By the way, I'm just kind of telling hypothetically. Even assholes can have perfectly valid physical theories. This is not needed. Like, it's all irrelevant. What is relevant is that we don't have a physical model. And the one we may come up with naively just fails because it does not conserve angular momentum. So just basic physical laws are violated. And that's pretty much the end of story, all right? So conclusions, ultra mega conclusions. The problem with ECDO is that it doesn't have a physical model, right? So it does not describe the dynamics of rotational change of Earth. Neither does it have agreement with basic physics, so the angular momentum is not conserved. Plus, it relies on many additional hypotheses, such as, again, inner structure of Earth, various like phase transitions of iron. I still don't understand why he needs it, but whatever. Then he relies on these on fake history essentially, and then he relies on cherry picking, like the orientation of various structures, which basically means confirmation bias. So yeah, so I would call him a non-ethical cherry picker, honestly, considering all of this, right? It's either ignorance or malevolence that he's doing. Yeah, so NECP, non-ethical cherry picker. ECDO by NECP. This will be my brief conclusion. You're welcome in the comments if you disagree.
As it is, no, just not viable, sorry. As it is right now, at the very least, anyway. Yeah, thank you for watching. The eons are closing.